Okay, I want to talk about something that came up on the other group, that a conversation a gentleman posted about sharpening a symmetrically ground knife. That means that it is a mirror left and a right. It should be a bi-bevel, uniform, even, 50-50 distinction, description, and that knife should be the same. A man asked, what happens if you sharpen this asymmetrically? Sharpen it like an asymmetrically ground knife. That's a different thing. That's the edge sharpening. That's your bevel. You're applying that. If it's a 50-50 ground knife, you cannot make the same angle with different bevel heights unless you move it off center of the knife. But if you keep everything centered, one side is a mirror of the other side, so the bevel heights, if they are applied by the sharpener, the person sharpening the knife, the knife sharpener user, if they apply that bevel right and everything is clamped center, it should be a mirror image, and the same bevel measurement should be the same height on both sides, if everything is lined up straight. And that's what happens with guided sharpener users, is that we have the ability to look at that distinction, to look that closely, and with the adjustments, the microfine adjustments that are afforded to us in these well-equipped guided sharpening systems, we're able to really dial that in and look at the particularness. Now, a guy asked, what happens if you sharpen that symmetrically ground knife asymmetrically? Well, for all intents and purposes, it should steer like a left-hand or right-hand knife. And I happen to have a Giotto in two different steels, I believe by the same maker. And this one, I just happened to notice in the conversation, this knife is steering. It's a 50-50 ground knife. This is 50-50. This two different steels. But this knife slipped off the radish and the celery, and then I started in the onions, and then I grabbed this other one off the board. See, I have different knives in different steels, so I can compare them, so that I have these things that I can have these studies, these conversations about. And dang if I didn't find that this knife tracked, and it coincided with that guy's question, or gal's question, I don't know, with that question, what happens if you sharpen it asymmetrically? And I found a knife that tracked on me. Now I'm going to chase it and try to find out, because when I look at the bevel heights, the knife went this way. And going on how we sharpen a asymmetrically ground left hand versus right hand, 70-30, the bevel heights, you would think that same thing would hold, but I found that it was the opposite. The knife was going this way, which would suggest that this bevel, in a right-handed knife, that this bevel would be more produced, so that the food was pushing off this way and pushing the knife that way. That's my logic. I'm trying to understand this stuff as I discuss it with you. But this knife was going this way, and this is the more pronounced bevel. So I need to get into it. And it was only because that question was posted on the Sharpening Enthusiast, and because I'm talking about asymmetrically ground knife, that I'm studying this stuff and I'm looking at it, because I've intentionally bought knives to try to learn so that someone can answer these questions, because I haven't ever had these things answered to me in a manner that was like definite, that really meant something, because nobody's ever put a control over it or compared them or did it intentionally in my perspective, in my point of view, from my Google searches and all that in my knife sharpening, whether I use one guided sharpener or another, in my knife sharpening, I haven't had these questions answered because these are questions particular to guided sharpener users. See, we're clamping the knife stationary and using adjustable angles, or we're using clamped angles and we're, with like the Sharp Maker, we're have a free knife that's not clamped, but we have the angle on the device. These are both guided sharpeners. With Wicked Edge, I'm clamping the knife so the knife is stationary, and I'm setting the angles on the guide rods. The Wicked Edge, you just use two. The other, you use one, the TS Pro or the Hapstone or the Lanskys, they only use one. It's the same thing, it's just what you prefer. They all work with trigonometry and three-dimensional trigonometry, and the better guided sharpeners give you better adjustability, and with better adjustability and range and gadgetry and whatever, it gets expansive. The problem is, or the dilemma is, that the more control you give yourself, the more particular you are, then you have the ability to make these comparisons. And that's where I am, because I'm setting those controls so that I can look at these things, so that I can try to answer these questions. Thanks.